Welcome to the Business Spotlight series. I am Sean Schoenmakers, the owner of Action Coach Dallas, where we are helping business owners build and grow their businesses to ultimately improve their lives. Today, I have Maggy Doherty with Maggy the Dietitian is her business, the owner of Maggy the Dietitian. And so we have her as our guest. Maggy, how you doing?
Hey, I'm good. Good afternoon, Sean. How are you?
Doing well. Yes. And so today we're going to be talking about Maggy's business, her journey in business ownership, and challenges, best practices, anything Maggy's willing to share with us so that we can help people see the real stuff that's happening out there and the real businesses, and they can potentially use it, of course, to their benefit. And so, if this is the first time you're kind of seeing these videos, make sure you like, subscribe, do all those things on YouTube so you can make sure you get the notifications when we drop in more of these types of videos. So, Maggy, without further ado, like I said, welcome. Thanks for being here today. Can
hmm
you maybe give us an introduction to your company and tell us what problems you solve?
Yeah, absolutely. So I started my entrepreneur business journey back in May of 2019, and that's when I opened my first business, Doherty Nutrition. Fast forward to today in 2025, we're a 35-person practice with multiple locations across Texas, Illinois, and really the problem that company solves is providing nutrition counseling to individuals who struggle with anything with food, and we accept insurance, so it makes it really accessible. And that was really kind of my first step in couple chapters of my business journey, which led me to opening Maggy the Dietitian, my most recent company that I opened in May of 2024. So about to hit a 1 year with that company. And kind of pivoted, and instead of working with individuals who need help with food, I'm working with business owners who need help with their practice. So that's the problem. I'm kind of have shifted from working with clients to working with dietitians and business owners.
Awesome. Yeah. And thanks for adding some of that detail about like number of people. I think sometimes people are like, oh, my business, that. And it's hard to know, like, well, what size is it and how many team is it? And, oh, my team, well, is that 3 team or is that 30 team? Right. So it's useful, I think, to know kind of what that scale is and looks
Yeah.
like. So,
Or if
so
my team is
appreciate.
like me, myself, and I,
Yeah, exactly. Right.
which
Yeah. All
which
three
is
of
what my
us.
team is now.
Yeah. We go crazy, man. We never agree, but we make it work. So, yeah.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. And so, as you said, kind of shifted from solving the problems maybe of individuals to now solving the business. I mean, you're still solving the problems of
Yeah.
individuals, but they're business owners. And like we work with business owners. And one of the reasons we like to work with business owners is because businesses, as you know, have team, right? So they have the ability to improve their lives. They can improve the lives of the team. There's really a lot, I think, of greater impact you could maybe have if you're working with businesses. And so anyway, cool that you've shifted from, hey, look, I'm solving the individual challenges now to the business owner challenges, which will still solve more individual challenges. So I like that.
Mhm.
Let's move into what makes your business so special. How and why did you start this, the secondary, the current business?
Yeah, long, long story medium. So I started Doherty Nutrition. I worked at Parkland Hospital in Dallas for about 2 years, and I'm just not a really good employee. I really like I go at the beat of my own drum. I hate accruing PTO. I hate clocking in and out. I really don't like following rules. And so once I became my own boss, I really just started thriving. And I'm not like a rebel in real life, but I think in like the corporate world, I am. And so I started Jordan Nutrition, and it was me, myself, and I. I saw the clients, I did the insurance, the billing, the marketing, the da 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 da. And as we grew, we kind of hired out for each of those roles I used to do. So now we hired a biller. I didn't have to do billing. Now we hired an admin. I didn't have to do the scheduling. Now we hired dietitians. I didn't have to see the clients. And so as we started to grow, we started to outsource for all the roles that I was doing. And that's the business owner's dream, is to scale, become replaceable, and have someone else do your job. And it's almost like you can't judge a book by its cover. When I tell people my story of Doherty Nutrition, they're like, "Oh my gosh, you were so successful. That's amazing that you can step away and you don't do anything within the company." But the flip side, it was really bittersweet becoming replaceable and getting to your business to a point where it's scaled and it doesn't need you. And I kind of lost my I lost a lot of things in that process. So I lost my entrepreneur outlet where I used to do what I want, when I want, how I wanted, why I started the company. But as we grew, there was policies and procedures to follow. And so sometimes I'd have people telling me I wasn't following the procedure correctly. And I'm like, I made the procedure.
Mhm.
And I really thrive on creativity. So I used to do our website, our articles, and then, we hired a website designer. We hired someone for SEO. So I kind of lost that creative thing. And so I kind of looked back and I was like, gosh, like all the things that got me to start this company are no longer here. And so I was starting to feel like a shell of a person. Fast forward through some other things, I realized I needed to start a company and become an entrepreneur and a business owner again, and really start a company that I didn't really want to scale. I didn't really want to become replaceable. Hence why I called it Maggy the Dietitian, because you
Yeah.
can't scale if it's only one
Well,
person.
you can always have your DBA, but yes, generally
Yeah,
speaking,
yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
So that's kind of a way to answer kind of
yeah,
how I got to starting the second company.
yeah. And I think I was gonna sort of touch on the comment about it's the business owner's dream to sort of have these people that do all the things for them, and really, I was gonna say, well, it depends on the business owner, right? Because as you experienced yourself,
Mhm.
not everyone is interested in that. Some people are, and I'm sure I don't know. Have you read the E Myth?
No, I haven't.
You haven't. Okay, so it's called the entrepreneurial myth, and that's what they talk a lot about in that book. It's probably one of the more well-known small business books that's out there. But they talk
Oh,
about how the entrepreneurial myth is that everyone that owns a business because they want to own a business. Like they specifically got into business because they're business people, and that's like usually far from the truth. It's if they were good at what they did and they realized that they started running a business at some point and they weren't really that educated. So anyway, all I'm getting at is some people start with that maybe end in mind, and maybe that's what they're looking for. But others, hey, look, yeah, we grew kind of because people kept coming to us, and so now we're kind of not sure what to do next. You obviously grew with really well. You've got a solid team, and then you realized, hey, look, this isn't actually. I mean, you want this,
yeah.
but I also want this, right? So anyway, I appreciate you taking us through your journey because I don't know that that's everyone else's journey as well. So it's cool to see
You
that.
know, it reminds me of that analogy. I may not tell it right, but basically, there was this old man, he was sitting on a pier and he was fishing and this business guy came up to him. Let me know if
Mm-hmm.
the story sounds familiar. He's like, "Oh, hey,
I have.
if so he's fishing and this business guy comes up to him and he's like, "Hey, you're catching so many fish if you buy this bigger boat, you can
Uh,
get more fish." And the guy's like, well, right now, I just fish on the afternoons and I get to go home with my family and I get to relax and I'm happy. And the guy's like, hey, but if you get this boat, then you can be more happy and have more money. And so he gets
yeah.
this bigger boat, he's got more money. And he says, hey, now if you hire people, you can do this and do more and more and more. And essentially, kind of the story was this business guy sold him this dream and idea of
Yeah.
scaling and working hard so he could have exactly what he had now, which was like a form of
Yeah.
retirement.
Yeah.
And it's just such an eye-opening kind of analogy where you can work really hard and build this big business to have this ultimate kind of dream or early retirement, but you also could, be happy with where you're at and kind of get the same thing in the long term with the amount of hours and money you're making now.
Yeah, it all depends on of course, the business owner's goals and dreams. And that's why
Mhm.
one of the first things we do when we work with clients is that's the first thing we do is, hey, look, let's clarify. Let's make sure we're all clear on where you want to go. Because if where you want to go is not that far, then okay, we don't have necessarily that much to do. But if it is really far, then we got more to do and there's more to conquer and all that kind of stuff. So, like you're saying, hey, let's make sure you have the dream you want versus the dream that maybe someone else is proposing to you. So
Mhm.
yeah.
Mhm.
So let's a couple of the questions on the business. So who primarily does your business serve? I think you kind of mentioned, but if I was in the audience, how would I know if I was a good fit for your product or service?
Can you wait? Say the first part of the question. I think I missed what you
Yeah,
said.
who primarily does your business serve? So if I was in the audience, how would I know if I am a good fit for your service or your business?
Yeah, so like my, ideal client is a dietitian who is just starting their private practice and thinks they can do it on their own and then just gets overwhelmed with stress, not quite sure what direction, is really overwhelmed with trying to figure out insurance or how to bill. Or maybe they figured it all out on their own and now they want to start hiring people and they have no idea how to interview, recruit once they get people on their team. How do you figure out what their metrics are? How do you hold them accountable? What if they're not performing? So it's really that person who they got started on their own and now some sort of fear, anxiety, or logistical thing is keeping them stuck. And my goal is to come over there and been like, reach out my hand and like, hey girl, like I've been there and I've effed up doing X, Y, or Z. Here's what we can kind of do differently for you. So I really just try to like step in as like a business friend and mentor and kind of fellow dietitian who's been there, done that.
Cool. And you mentioned, hey girl, but I assume you work with men too.
Hey, I was reading the funniest thing where basically about like, a lot of people say like dude or hey guys, but
Yeah,
like it's
yeah.
always the masculine version, not girl. So I just kind of threw that out. But no, I mean, every single one of my clients is a female, but again,
Okay.
fem the dietitians it's very predominantly a female. Like at our 35 person group practice, we have one male. And we
Huh.
try so hard to get males, but again, in my grad school class, there was 25 people and there was two or three guys. So
Yeah.
it's just for whatever reason, it's
Yeah.
just a more female driven career path.
Yeah. So generally your audience or your target is women. So,
Yeah.
but not
Yeah, and
not
I wouldn't say
because
I'm like
you,
targeting women. I'm like targeting dietitians, but
yeah.
there's not too
Right.
many men. But I've worked with a couple men dietitian, but it's just not as common.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. So, what makes your business unique? Why do customers or clients choose you?
My number one kind of differentiator is just like being very authentic and real and direct. So I don't sugarcoat my journey and say, hey, look, I built this 35-person practice and here's all the things that I did right and that went
Hmm.
really well. I
Hmm.
typically lead with, like, here's the biggest mistake I made and what I learned from it. So I try to just be very authentic and real and not sugarcoat
Hmm.
anything. And I've gotten a lot of really positive feedback when my dietitians have worked with other business coaches. They're like, you just shoot it straight. And I have a friendly demeanor, so I'm not like rude or unkind or just like really blunt about it,
You
but just
idiot.
like, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
it's nice and direct. And I don't want to waste their time or their money. And again, it's kind of how I treat, I don't know, almost like this conversation. Like, I'm not going to go into like a ton of small talk just to like warm you up or waste the time. It's like I like getting right into stuff. So that's one thing. And then the second is just like having that been there, done that. I've started two private practices. I've kind of done through the business filing, the taxes, all that stuff before. And so a lot of people want to work with me because they want to practice the size that I've kind of grown mine to, or they've wanted to start a second practice and seen I've done both. So again, I try to come from it with a place of lived experience, not like, hey, I went to business school. I didn't go to business school. Or, hey, I took this business course. I didn't take that business course. And
Hmm.
so really coming from a place of my coaching comes from a place of real experience and lessons and mistakes that I made and how can I take that mistake and help you not make it?
Hmm. Yeah, and of course, helping the same type of business, you have a lot of the coaching knowledge, right? You have a lot of the business knowledge you can coach on, right? So, yeah, and we work with a lot of different businesses. We're not really industry specific. Obviously, we're business coaches, but we also work with coaches. So when we work with coaches, it's like, oh, we really know, like, we really know all the ins and outs typically that you're seeing. But of course, the other businesses, great. We still know a lot of the stuff, but we're not going to know the specifics. In fact, we should know the specifics. That's why you're the expert in your field. So, but
Mhm.
you have a lot of that. So that's obviously super valuable to those folks. As you look back, you mentioned you kind of lead with, "Hey, my biggest issue or my biggest challenge was this." I'm curious, as you look back on your journey so far, what has been the most memorable or the hardest challenge that you've had, and how did you overcome
I was thinking about this one. And there's a quote that came to mind, which is don't let your adversity go unwasted. And so I try to really lean on that as like through all the difficult stuff I've gone through, like how do I take that difficult experience and not hush or be quiet or pretend it didn't happen, but kind of take that pain and turn it into purpose. And so as I look back on like the most memorable and hardest things in my business, it's just like it's almost like a flash deck of like all these like kind of different memories coming up. But truth be told, like the hardest thing is I am in the middle of a divorce right now. And my husband, who was my best friend, was also my business partner. And so as we went through the process of figuring out how to work as husband and wife and business partners together, there was so many things that we both did wrong and that we both learned from. But is there's kind of this, it's just been like this ultra marathon of trials and lessons. And I think the biggest thing that I learned in our early days is just like super poor boundary setting on both sides. It's like we were so excited about the business that we
Mm.
talked about it all the time. And so the business kind of was a higher priority than our relationship. And after 5 o'clock would hit, that's what we would talk about at dinner. That's what we would talk about on walks. And so it was both of our faults. And so now I have business clients who are working with a friend, a best friend, a partner. And I'm like, boundaries, boundaries, boundaries. Like
Mhm.
prioritize that relationship, cut off after 5. Um, and then, there's just kind of different things where, so we were kind of, you're mentioning it earlier where, two business, one person may want to scale a business and it become replaceable and one person may not. And looking back, I don't think I ever realized that we had this different vision where
Mm.
mine was to be a dietitian and have fun and be happy. And like this business was like a cool outcome of it where he wanted to scale it into a, something that could financially provide for our family and be scalable. And like neither person was wrong, but then when you tried to mesh it on the other one, there was a lot of resistance. So yeah, I think just learning a lot about boundary setting and then about how neither person could be right or wrong, but understanding that why is so important. And that was just missed.
Yeah, and kind of like you said, it's not necessarily a right or wrong thing, but it's a hey, if we're going to be partners, obviously not just in life but in business, hey, let's make sure we're going in the same again to this kind of the same destination. And I mean we've seen partners that are married or not married split
Mhm.
because as we start talking more about hey, and where are we going in the future and why are we doing this and all that kind of stuff, then they start to see more and more that they're not on the same page. So unfortunately, you guys, I mean, fortunately, unfortunately, it's always you're like, oh, I'm sorry to hear you're getting divorced, but I'm assuming it's for the better, right? So, anyways, so hopefully, obviously, it's the same with you guys, but definitely a challenge.
Mhm.
And you guys, like you said, went through it on not just the business side, but also the personal side. So
Mhm.
that I think would be tough for most people. So
Yeah. Yeah,
yeah.
definitely.
What about obviously you have decent team as you mentioned in sort of the first business, maybe not the same type of team in the second business, but what have you learned? What's been your biggest learning? And human capital is important, obviously, for businesses. What have you learned, or what's been the biggest learning you've had as an employer since you've been in business?
The biggest thing I've learned is don't hire based on years of experience or credentials. I made that mistake twice. There was one time I hired a dietitian who had multiple years of experience. I think she had seven years of experience. I'm like, oh, cool, you've been a dietitian for 7 years. You must know what you're doing. Hired. I'm not even gonna clinically check you.
Yeah.
And she had started, and I was like, oh my gosh, you don't know X, Y, and Z things. And again, it wasn't her fault, but it was my fault as the employer that I assumed this person knew a certain amount of knowledge based on their years of experience. So that happened once, and then I realized no matter how many years someone's been a dietitian, I still need to fact check them. A couple years go by, we hire someone who has multiple credentials that are hard to get. And so those credentials reflect they know this area. Again, we didn't fact check them on this area. They started and we were like, oh, shoot, we
Mhm.
assumed this credential meant you knew that or that. And so I think the biggest lesson that I'll share with all of the people I coach as well is like,
Yep.
don't ever hire based on those years or those experience, but um, making sure you're asking. And I notice anytime I interview someone, if they just naturally are giving off experience and I can tell they're confident in their trade, I don't ask any clinical questions. When I start to doubt someone, that's where the interview gets a lot more technical. And so like my spidey senses, like once I start asking you questions, like
Mhm.
there's a radar that's gone up. So I think that's been the biggest lesson as an employer was just throw out the resume. Don't even look
Yeah.
at the person's resume.
Yeah. So we have a hiring process that we use with our clients, and I tell clients, and I'm not saying you can do this with every position, but like I tell clients, I'm like, look, I honestly don't look at the resumes. I go to an interview, I ask questions, right? Of course, I get information from the interview questions, but I'm like, I really don't care that much about. It depends on the role I'm hiring, but like, I don't care that much about the history or the background because obviously I'm a trainer. I feel like I can train people if they're interested and willing to learn. So, anyways, I feel like the challenge, like you mentioned, is hey, look, if you see this breadth of stuff that they've done, you almost assume, like you said, you kind of assume that they have a certain knowledge, but who's to say? Who knows, right? I mean, and we see this with clients all the time. We got people, painters. They hire a painter, and they're like, the guy said he could paint. He's been painting for 20 years. I'm like, yeah, but painting what? What was he doing with? You have to find out. It's kind of broad. He's been painting, cool, but like, and so same thing. Obviously, being a dietitian, same thing with all the different roles out there. So yeah, I think we kind of naturally do that assumption. In fact, one of my pet peeves when people say, "Oh, I have 20 years of experience," I'm like, I don't care, right? Like, what I do care about is what you did in those 20 years, right? So, anyways, great
Mhm.
learning. A lot of people still make that mistake to this day. So, but once they experience it, they
Yeah.
usually change the tune. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
good stuff. What about so you obviously had a pretty good amount of success. What would you do different if you were to start over today? What would you do different?
I is I it's always a challenging that's always the most challenging question is like, if I could go back and do it over, what would I do differently? And I'm like, but I wouldn't be like right here, right now with you if I didn't make all of those mistakes. And again, I there's always a couple quotes that just like really stick with me. And one was like, all the opposite end of success is failure.
Mhm.
And behind every successful person, there's a story of great failures. And so, if I answer that question, one is I wouldn't do anything differently because those failures got to me to right now. And I had to go through those hardships for whatever person or business or client that I may work with in the future. I had to be held up by these things to meet them at that point. So I kind of lean on that a lot. And then it's like, if I did have a time machine and I could go back then, as I talked earlier about, boundaries where my business partner and I had a hard time setting boundaries. When I look at it, yeah, we did, but also I did. I think I was really malleable into what other people wanted out of my business or what thought it was best. And there was always that like gut intuition I had that it's just like, it didn't feel right. It's not what I wanted, but this person made it sound convincing or really great or really profitable. And I think I would have gone back and trusted my gut and I would have said no to a lot more things. Um, if that would have happened, the practice would probably not be at 35 people, but probably would be at 10 to 12,
Mhm.
9
Mhm.
people.
Yeah.
And so I could have done that and trusted my gut and stayed in, kept a business that really made me and my life and the kind of that smaller circle happier. But in exchange, there's now thousands more people that we've helped clinically, as well as dietitians having jobs they never would before. So it's kind of this trade-off where, hey, if I went back in time, like how would people be negatively or positively affected? But I think I try to bring that lesson going forward, which is kind of why I wanted to start my own business with just me, is to not even have that influence and just really being in my own sphere of influence, getting to do what I want, when I want, how I want, and taking those, trusting my gut and not having as much, uh, my barriers a lot less permeable right now.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Yeah, we talk about the progression of goals typically being, if you kind of look at the hierarchy of needs, this kind of follows that. But goals for you, like, hey, I need these things to survive and kind of be whoever it is or have the things I want. And then once you achieve those, then it's like, okay, well, I don't need these things, but now what do I want? So now you're looking at goals of things you actually want versus what you need. And then of course the third level, once you get all the things you want, it's like, well, goals for others, like, kind of outwardly, so helping more people, like you said, thousands of other, folks that have gotten the treatments and benefits of things you guys help them with. And so, but if like you don't usually start with the outward first, which like you said is maybe how you kind of didn't realize it, but you were kind of doing more of that initially. So got to take care of you first, as we know, right? Put the oxygen mask on first, so you can help others. And so now it sounds like you're on that path. So
Yeah.
yeah, good for you. Let's see, what's the next question I've got for you? So what's next? What's the next goal, milestone for you?
Starting next week, I have my first intern starting, and I'm actually so excited to like kind of start this process of like of growth again in a way that is benefiting me. So I was sitting, I have this to-do list and I have it, I teach all my clients it, but I basically make a to-do list and I get a piece of paper, I fold it in half, fold it into three. So it's these two rows and three columns of high, medium, and low priority. And I do my business up top, my personal at bottom. And my low for my business every week just gets like longer and longer and longer. And I can really only get to high and medium. In the low or, ideas I want to, monetize my newsletter. I want to put more resources up on my website to have like downloadable passive income stuff, but I just can't get to it. And so I realized like I just don't have enough bandwidth to get to it. So I need help. So I have an intern who's kind of starting a business internship with me. And I'm like, oh my gosh, it's going to give me the bandwidth to kind of accomplish some of these things. So I'm excited for that. But I've had so many different ideas on how I can scale my business without scaling, employees or services. But more, I do a lot of workshops and classes and I record it and then I put it on my
Yeah,
website for sale. But I'm like, I want to take that and like create reels out of that to kind of get more people in the funnel, or
yeah,
um just so many ideas I just can't quite get out there, but definitely monetizing a newsletter, getting an intern, and just developing more downloadable resources for my people.
yeah. More content,
So yeah, that's next. And I'm like, oh my
tools.
gosh, it's starting next week. It's
That's
real.
awesome. Yeah, there's so many ways to leverage a business. Obviously, people is one of the ways, but there's a lot of other ways to leverage. And you talked about some of them, and so yeah, there's really you can get really far in a business and be really profitable, make a lot of money, all these different things, help a lot of people just by yourself, right? If you can tackle some of these other ways, and so glad to see you're getting some help to make that progress.
Yeah.
So before we get into the final question, I've got how can others learn more about you, your company? How can they get in contact or get more info?
Yeah. So everything's Maggy the Dietitian. Maggie's hard to spell, dietitian's hard to spell. So it's Maggy with a Y. Dietitian, nobody ever spells it right, but Dietitian. It's really annoying. We're like pediatrician, obstetrician, everyone
They'll
spells it
spell
the same,
different.
and then dietitians spell it differently.
Yeah.
So, and then dietitians get so offended when people spell it incorrectly. I'm like, we're the only healthcare provider that spells it
Yeah.
not how you're supposed to spell it. So,
Yeah.
anyways, it's Maggy the Dietitian on website, Instagram, LinkedIn, all the social medias besides I don't do Twitter. So
Okay.
that's how everyone can
Cool.
find me.
And appreciate that. And so, any special offers you'd like to offer any listeners?
I hadn't. I'm always one for like rolling with the punches and coming up with stuff on the spot. So I'm like, make me a deal. Tell me what you need.
Or best offers or best offer.
Best offer.
Yeah.
My other thing is, I know I not all your listeners. I doubt there's even a listener who's a dietitian. I'd be very surprised.
I don't know. We'll see. We'll see.
Maybe there is. But my favorite business advice comes from outside of my industry. I love pulling from different industries because then you just get this different perspective. So I'd really challenge anyone who's not in healthcare or not a dietitian to consider a business coach who's not in their field to get that different perspective. Um, and I do a couple different, I mean, really a lot of the offers that I like to give is like, hey, come to one of my group stuff for free the first time, just to
Mhm.
kind of get that experience. So if there's a master class that I'm hosting over the next month, come join that for free. Otherwise, like I said earlier, make me a deal.
Nice. All right. I like it. You heard it. Make an offer. See what happens. So awesome. Well, thank you very much, Maggie, for joining us and for all the insights and input. And that's it for now. And hope you have a good rest of the day.
Cool. Thanks for having me, Sean.